Fear is a driving emotion that forces us to make split-second decisions. It is caused by a dangerous environment or imminent harm. In an article by Stephen Stonesy, PhD, fear and anxiety are often mistaken for the same thing. Anxiety is mostly mental, by you, about you. In Keeper Me by Richard Wagamese, Garnet fears his identity and what happens when he finds it. He fears the unknown because for his entire life he had been trying to be something that he wasn't. Garnet was a scared child in a dark room trying to find his way out. When his family finally accepts him, they become his nightlight. Generally speaking, to overcome one's fear, one must first recognize it, as said by Luke Sogage. Face the fear, acknowledge that fear, where it is coming from. Once you learn to recognize that fear, you can deal with it. Luke said these words as he himself was trying to overcome his fear of residential school experience. The next step would be to gradually expose oneself to one's fear, then direct confrontation, all while expecting the unexpected outcome. Trying to run from one's fear at this point will only ruin the work to face it. Most people, however, never really get around to facing their fear.
Your notion or view of fear?
So fear, I think there's a couple different types of fear. The first, I think, is sort of the type of fear that we feel sometimes like it's almost like physical. It's an immediate reaction to something that we're scared of. And I think that the second form of fear is a little bit more, it's sort of a more of an internal fear that we have. And that sometimes can prolong itself within us. When we're scared of something, it doesn't tend to go away right away. So, and then again, it's mental, emotional, stuff inside of us.
I think it's healthy for someone to always live in fear.
There should always be a small element of fear in somebody's life, and it can guide you, but it can also mislead you. So having too much pressure of fear following you your entire life isn't
Overcome fear.
Well, you overcome fear by finding someone who cares about you and just having them be there for you so that you can realize, oh, the world isn't so scary as you think.
Do you think everybody is afraid of change? If so, why?
Yeah, I think everyone's afraid of change because it's the fear of the unknown and changing your regular norm to something else.
Residential schools are a dark time not only for Aboriginal people but in Canadian history as well. Children were forcibly taken from their homes to go to residential schools, which were run by the clergy, which was funded by the Canadian government. These schools were made to kill the Indian inside and make them civilized. These experiences didn't happen to everyone, but the majority of residential schools were not pleasant. Children were beaten and punished. They suffered physical, mental, sexual abuse in these schools. The children in these schools lived in fear of the teachers, staff, and even their peers. These traumatic experiences has caused many problems, not only those who attended these schools, but generations afterwards. But it's true. Seen us praying strange and God is full of fear about it. Not their fault. Us, we're all the same, us humans. See something we don't understand, we get scared. Fear. If you fear something long enough, you get to feeling you gotta control it, destroy it, change it. Better in the long run to take time to understand, but don't work that way in the world lots. Fear done lots to make up history. Other people's fear pretty much made us Indians history anyway.
This young girl, Rachel.
Purna. Her name is Purna, not Rachel. Call her by her real name, for God's sakes. Purna Kisum. You tell me, Reverend, what is it that makes a young girl run across the prairie for 3 days with no food or water trying to get away from this place? Sure as hell isn't God's work.
In the 1960s, a different method was used to assimilate Aboriginal children. This was called the 60 Scoop, which was when Aboriginal children were taken away from their families and put into white family homes. Most of the time, the children were mistreated in the home and just adopted mostly for the money which the government provided. Garnet, the main character in Keeper Me, was taken with his siblings from their family at a young age. This caused Garnet to never understand his identity and culture, which caused him to be scared of his identity. The only information he got about his culture was stereotypes and negative views. Most of his adult life was spent trying to be someone he wasn't, for example, pretending to be Black, Hawaiian, or even Hispanic. In Patrick Ness's book, More Than This, he states, "We have to lie to ourselves to live, otherwise we go crazy." Aboriginal people, and specifically the Ojibwe people, have a different way of facing and overcoming their fear. Aboriginal people usually heal by expressing their feelings through speaking circles, by sharing their fear and experiences with others. Ojibwe people use basically the same healing method, but use a drum to help them connect them to Mother Earth and their own spirit. In other words, they must know themselves to know their true fear. In Hirohiko's Araki's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, one of the antagonists states, "In this world, you can only win if you completely understand yourself." The Ojibwe also use the healing circle, which includes mind, body, spirit, and heart, which makes up a healthy community. The Ojibwe community comes together and shares their grief, pain, joy, and humor. This practice helps them reclaim their culture after devastating impacts of residential schools and the 60s scoop. Garnet heals in this way, by being surrounded by his community, connecting with his inner self using the drum and old teachings.
In conclusion, to overcome one's fear is to acknowledge it and face it, not letting it take control of your life, not to live in fear. Even though there are similarities and differences on how Aboriginal people and other cultures deal with fear, we are all just human in the end. Garnet states, "Remember how scared I was when I was coming here for the first time? Scared about how not being able to be an Indian, scared I'd never be able to be one, scared I was always going to be on the outside." In the end of the book, he realizes that he was not afraid of his identity, but not being able to live up to it. By learning about the culture he lost when he was taken, with the help of his family and community, Garnet finds himself, grows as a person, and as an Indian, no longer afraid of the dark. In the end, no matter where one is from, one has to know oneself, grow as a person, and know one's fear. Only then can we overcome our fears.
How do you overcome fear and find the light? I said that in